Okay, so this is what ended up happening with the last guy that I mentioned in the video that you watched before this one. He basically went on by his life, like I said, with the girl that he thought was the one for him. And I went on about my life. I was still hurting and in pain. And I ultimately started therapy, as I mentioned in the first video of the series, to work through the situation. That was pretty traumatizing for me. And I also learned that I was dealing with some anger issues that I needed to address. And most likely those anger issues were rooted in childhood. But yes, that situation, not getting my way in that situation, really brought all of that out. And I knew I needed to get some help. So months passed by, and sometime into the next year, so this New Year's 2015, maybe mid-year, he reaches out to me again. And this is the first time we've had a conversation in months since he basically stopped talking to me outright in the prior December 2014. And he was calling, as he said, to check in on me and to also apologize for what he'd done. I guess he had thought about it and wanted to apologize for it. He was still with the woman at the time, but I guess something about the guilt he was feeling behind how he treated me in that situation, specifically taking my virginity and just dropping me not even 2 months later, and it didn't really make sense, and it was without regard to me. I believe that got to him. So we were talking as friends at this point in time, and maybe a part of me was kind of hopeful that he would come back around, but I realized that most likely would not be the case, with him still being with the young lady from December. Okay, so then at another conversation, or maybe that same conversation when we reconnected, he did mention, yeah, well, you actually are a good woman. So he acknowledged that about me. I was never perfect, and I've never mentioned that I was perfect. And when he acknowledged, I guess he really reflected on that, like, this woman is really not a terrible woman. Though he did see some of those moments of anger when I was frustrated over the situation between he and myself, especially after we were engaging sexually, and I let him know that I felt guilt about engaging sexually because I wasn't married, yet I kept falling into sin with him. And so I was upset, and part of it was I was projecting, though I'm still believing that how he handled it in the end was wrong. So all of that came up in that conversation. And then ultimately, he decided to ask for some help. I want to say if it wasn't that year, it probably was the next year, to help him with writing some papers for his class. Like, he wrote the papers, but he just wanted somebody to look over them, to edit them. Because in 2016, I began a tutoring business, and a part of the services included editing. So I started helping him. He was in Bible college at the time, and he admitted that his strengths did not include writing, and he wanted some assistance. And so, yes, he did pay me for that. He did pay my desired fee to get that assistance from me. So at the end of the day, I don't know if that was because he really needed the help, which I believe he needed the help, but I don't know if he decided to go ahead and go with me with that in that situation because he was feeling guilty, or because he thought it was going to be helpful, or to me, or if he just really needed the help, or it could be a combination of things. I don't know where that came from, but that was how that ended up going with this particular guy. It was a huge mess for me. I just think back to how messy that was and how I could have avoided that had I been following the way of God. And it was a huge lesson for me regarding this situation. One that I will never forget, and one of the most painful situations that I had to endure. But here's an interesting twist. So this fellow, ever since about 2015, when he reached out that first time initially, after we were not talking anymore, after he blocked communications with me in December 2014, he was communicating with me every 2 to 3 years to check in on me and to apologize for his actions in 2014 when he took my virginity and left me hanging. Right? It seemed like there was no concern in the world, as it related to him. he kept apologizing, and ultimately I had to tell him, please stop apologizing to me, because at this point years have gone by since it all happened, and I've moved on. And at that point, even some years down the road, I had married my now ex-husband. So I definitely wasn't thinking about that situation, not like that, not to the extent that he was thinking about it, but he seemed to have this huge sense of remorse. I don't know where that was coming from, but in the end, the last time he did that apology number was in 2023. Yes, y'all, 2023. And I was amazed that he was still doing that. I had to just say once and for all, please stop apologizing for this. I have forgiven you. God has forgiven you. You need to forgive yourself and move on. So the last time he reached out to me was sometime in the fall 2024, and he was just checking in, but he did not apologize. So y'all, I feel like that story, I don't know how this story is gonna end. I'm not at a point anymore, unlike in the beginning when I met him and I had a very desperate energy about me. I don't feel a desire to reconnect with him in that way. I don't block him because he's not being a nuisance to me or doing anything bad, but I just don't feel anything for him to be close to him, if that makes sense. But yeah, I hope that gave you some insight regarding my lessons as relates to guy number one. Now my next video is going to hit on to guy number two. So see you in the next video.